have I got a story for you. I feel like I need to tell you to sit back and buckle up. But first, let me welcome you to today's investigation. I'm Brooke, and this is Armchair Investigator. For today's case, I need to take you back to the tail end of the 90s. Let's see if by the end of the video, your head is spinning just like mine was. Was. Okay, you can buckle up now. Did Shakespeare have it right all along when he said love will kill you in the end? Or is the result of today's investigation a matter of opportunity? On January 13th, 1999, 18-year-old Hae Min Lee disappeared after leaving Woodlawn High School in Baltimore, Maryland. Her family knew something was wrong when they got a call from their cousin's teacher at 3:30 asking them to come and pick her up from school. Hae was in charge of picking up her little cousin and taking her home. There was no way she'd forget. Hae was one of those uber-responsible teens that somehow managed to juggle everything. She was an honor roll student and part of Magnet, a school program with a rigorous curriculum that prepared students for higher education. It involved a lot of college-level work. She participated in Ecology Club, French Club, and Students Against Destructive Decisions. She played field hockey, lacrosse, and managed boys wrestling. She gave her all in everything she did. Friends described her as goofy and cheerful. She loved the movie Titanic, and Sprite was her favorite pop. She liked the Dallas Cowboys, but not because she cared anything about football. Rather, blue and silver were her favorite colors. She was the kind of person you'd take your troubles to. She really cared about what you were going through and would try to come up with solutions to any problems that you might have. I hope you're getting a clearer picture of the kind of person that she was, so you can imagine her presence was sorely missing from the community. After getting that call from his cousin's teacher, Hae's brother Young calls his sister's workplace looking for her, then her best friend Aisha, and finally he tries calling the school. Nobody had seen her. Later that evening, Hae's family calls police over to the house. The grandmother gives them Hae's diary, hoping it might shed some light on her whereabouts. Friends were getting concerned, but not overly worried. They figured she didn't have her pager on her and knew there were a number of places she could be. If anything, they seemed more worried about the fact that she was going to be in big trouble with her mom. During the time Hae went missing, there was also a big ice storm that had hit the city, causing power outages and school closings. Friends figured she was keeping safe. You have to remember that social media and the concept of being constantly connected like we are now wasn't a thing back then. When the 15th rolled around and she hadn't shown up to her good friend Krista's 18th birthday party, that's when they knew something was wrong. Hae's diary really proved to be a wealth of information that shed light on what the teen was going through. Things like her deepest thoughts and the stressors in her life. On one of the pages, she had a phone number written down. It belonged to 17-year-old Adnan Syed. Adnan was a popular and extremely well-liked student at Woodlawn High School. He was in the same grade as Hae, and they ran in the same social circles due to being in the Magnet program. Adnan was the middle child of 3 sons. He had a close-knit family and described having a solid family home growing up. His parents were loving, albeit strict. They had a firm no-dating policy. They didn't even want him hanging out with girls. You can probably imagine how well that worked out. As junior prom approaches, Adnan asks Hae to be his date. They both had a thing for each other, so Hae was thrilled to be going with him. That night, Adnan was crowned Prince of the Prom. During the first official dance after the crowning of prom royalty, they played Hae's favorite song. Now, if you were born before the year 2000, there's a good chance you probably know it. It was Casey and JoJo's All My Life. Comment below if you know the song. Hae was so bummed not to be dancing with Adnan for that song. That was a pretty good banger. But she knew it was tradition for the prom king and queen and prince and princess to share a dance. Wouldn't you know it though, Adnan stops dancing with the prom princess and asks Hae for the dance. I mean, come on, how could she not fall in love with him? She even wrote the same sentiment in her diary. The pair hit it off so well at prom, they shared their first kiss there that night. Hae would later write, "Parting is such a sweet sorrow. The moment he went out the door, I missed him. I went to sleep and dreamed. Since then, I keep on falling deeper and deeper into him." Suffice it to say, the romance between Adnan and Hae continued to blossom. In her eyes, he was the perfect guy. He would surprise her with flowers at school, make cards for her, and even pay late-night visits to her bedroom window. "Romeo, is that you?" Like most things in life, it wasn't all sunshine and roses. Hae was becoming increasingly frustrated with one aspect of their relationship, and it was a big deal to her. She wanted a relationship where they didn't have to sneak around. One where they could have dinner at each other's house and hang out. You know, typical relationship stuff. While Hae's family wasn't as strict as Adnan's, They did want to meet the family of any boys she'd be dating, but that could never happen since Adnan wasn't allowed to date at all. When I mentioned earlier that Hae had a lot of responsibility in her life, I wasn't kidding.
How about any school activities while you're here?
I played field hockey for 2 years, I played lacrosse for 3 years, and I also managed boys wrestling.
That's a lot to do. Do you have
Yeah.
time to have a job while you're doing this?
Yeah, I try to manage my schoolwork and my after-school work.
She lived with her grandparents, her mother, her uncle, 2 younger cousins, and her brother. She had an after-school job at LensCrafters, plus she also helped her uncle out at his store. It was almost like she lived 2 lives. On one side was her family and home life, and on the other side were her friends in school. She didn't want to mix the two. By August of '98, Hae's feelings toward Adnan were changing. She really felt like she was losing herself and that her life revolved around Adnan. And to make matters worse for the two, Adnan's parents went to the next school homecoming dance with him just to be sure he wasn't dating anyone. As one might imagine, this caused a ton of embarrassment for Adnan, plus it caused a lot of turmoil for the pair's relationship. So much so that less than 3 days after the homecoming dance, Hae makes the decision to break up with Adnan. The breakup doesn't last long though, and the two get back together. This would happen one more time before their final breakup. 27 days after Hae goes missing, a man named Alonzo Sellers finds a body in Baltimore's Leakin Park and calls 911.
I think I may have discovered a bag in Pop.
It was Hae's. She'd been strangled. Who would want to hurt Hae? And how many enemies could a high school honor student possibly have? There weren't any particular persons of interest that seemingly stood out to detectives at first. But because of the nature of her death, they felt like it had to be someone she knew. There's a reason they call strangulation a crime of passion. Let's go over the list of suspects. There was Adnan with the typical jealous ex-boyfriend theory. After their final breakup, Hae would start dating a guy named Don Kleindienst. She'd been fighting her feelings for Don when she was still dating Adnan. She confessed to her diary, "Every time I close my eyes, I see my baby, but I keep on thinking about someone else. Don Kleindienst. Why? I don't know, but I keep wanting to get closer to him." Don and Hae worked together at LensCrafters, and even though her friends had never met him, they assumed he was around their age. Imagine their shock when they find out Don was 22. Now, 4 years might not seem like a huge age difference, but when one person in the relationship is still in high school and the other person is old enough to go to the bar, that almost puts them in 2 different worlds. Adnan told officers he was supposed to get a ride home from Hae on the 13th, which was the day she went missing, but he got held up at school and thought Hae got tired of waiting and left. Don Kleindienst was also looked at as a possibility. Hae's friends were concerned with how quickly she was falling for Don. She had just gotten out of a relationship with Adnan, and just like their relationship, this one too involved sneaking around. In December, she was writing about her confusion between Adnan and Don. And by January, she was telling her diary how much she loved Don and thought they were soulmates. Hae had been out with Don the night before she disappeared and had gotten home late at night. Don claims he was supposed to see her again on the 13th after work. That night, he said he got home around 7 p.m. from his shift at LensCrafters. By that time, the police had already called his house looking for her, though they didn't actually get to speak to Don until 1:30 in the early morning hours of the 14th. What was he doing between the hours of 7 p.m. and 1:30 a.m.? It's during that time police start canvassing parking lots, motels, hotels, hospitals. Okay, side note. This investigation has a lot of conflicting reports. It's actually quite frightening the way nearly everyone's story changes. So if you're anything like me, then this is going to be a big pet peeve for you, so be warned. Since we're talking about Don, I think it's important to note that on January 28th, Hae's good friend Debbie Warren, and I use friend loosely, gives detectives a statement where she claims she spoke to Hae on the 13th at approximately 3 p.m. Hae told her she was meeting Don at the mall after school, but this doesn't quite make sense considering Hae was scheduled to work at LensCrafters from 6 to 10 p.m. She most likely would have crossed paths with Don at work, even if it were just for a few minutes. We also know that she had planned to see Don after her shift ended. If we're to believe what Don has said, he would have been at work for his shift and unable to meet her at the mall. But Don's a whole other fiasco. Shortly after Hae goes missing, Debbie gets in touch with Don to talk to him about Hae's possible whereabouts and what he all knew. And boy, did they talk. Debbie admits they ended up having a 7-hour conversation that clearly veers away from missing Hae, because she also tells him that she's going to be visiting her sister at college for spring break, and he asks to visit her. She said it was clear Don was interested in her romantically. Inappropriate. It doesn't seem like investigators looked too deep into Don. Hae goes missing in January, but it wasn't until October that investigators asked for his timesheets for the day of the 13th. It's also a good time to point out that Don's manager at LensCrafters was his mother. More on LensCrafters later. Investigators also looked at Alonzo Sellers, the man who found Hae. He claims that on February 9th, he had been driving to Coppin State College where he was a maintenance worker. Well, I should say he had been drinking and driving when he pulled over to pee. He says he walked into the brush so as not to be seen by passerbys. When he looked down, he saw hair and then eventually made out a foot. That's when he called 911. Did he really just happen to come across her while pulling over to go to the bathroom? The man didn't have the cleanest record. He had prior documented issues with indecent exposure and trespassing. A little unsettling, yes, but does that make him a killer? He's also been scrutinized for just how far he walked into the brush. When he found Hae's body, he had walked about 127 feet off the road. Take a look at the testimony he gave.
Mr. Sellers, let me direct your attention back to February the 9th, 1999. Do you recall that day?
I don't recall that day. I don't know what you said.
Well, sir, you recall the day that you found the body in Leakin
Oh,
Park,
that's a
don't
good,
you?
yes, okay, I recall that
That was a
day.
pretty important day for you, was it not?
If you explain that, I would know what you're talking about.
Okay.
How could you ever forget the day you discovered a body? That's all I'm saying. Up until this point, they still hadn't been able to locate Hae's 1998 Nissan Sentra. On February 12, 1999, an anonymous call comes into police. The caller is described as an Asian male between the age of 18 and 21 years old. He tells police that they should concentrate on the victim's boyfriend, Adnan, going on to say that in the past, Adnan had taken Hae to Leakin Park for romantic encounters. The caller also stated that Hae had ended the relationship about a week before she went missing. The caller then hung up, only to call back a few minutes later with another piece of information. He said about a year ago, Adnan told a friend who attended a different school that if he ever hurt his girlfriend, he would drive her car into a lake. What? What do you think about this anonymous call? I don't know, for some reason it just doesn't sit right with me. I thought it was interesting that they were able to pinpoint the caller's age. It almost seems too specific. But the call on February 12th isn't the only anonymous tip that police receive. On February 1st, a full week before Hae's body is found, a call comes into Baltimore's Crime Stoppers hotline implicating Adnan. That tipster would eventually be paid $3,075. It seemed like the call on February 12th was used to eclipse the February 1st call. Even though the identity of the tipster from the February 1st call remains unknown, it didn't stop people from speculating. This is where I need to introduce you to Jay Wilds. He was a 19-year-old student at Woodlawn High School in the graduating class of '98. And while he wasn't a part of Hae and Adnan's friend group, the girl he was dating, Stephanie McPherson, was. Jay is what you might call a colorful character. He was a local dealer and worked at an adult store. At one point or another, whether it was back in high school or years later, many would remark that there was just something off about his personality. Some of Adnan's friends had said that the reason they thought Adnan was extra friendly with Jay was so that Jay wouldn't think Adnan was trying to get with his girl. It's believed Jay may have been the tipster to collect the $3,075 from the February 1st phone call. Jay had been inquiring about the price of a teacher's Suzuki motorcycle, which Kelly Blue Book put at $3,000. The Crime Stopper reward money would have given him enough to buy it. We might not know what information was given from the tipster or what was all said, but one can certainly speculate on where the finger was pointed during the call. On February 1st, the same day the tip was received, detectives visit Woodlawn High School where they enlist the help of French teacher Hope Schab. She was a younger, popular teacher, and police felt that she would make a good liaison between students and police. They leave her with a list of questions to ask students that directly related to Adnan and Hae's relationship, including the question, do you know where Adnan and Hae go hook up? On February 3rd, Adnan's criminal records were subpoenaed, but no one else's records are ever requested over the course of the investigation. On February 9th, Hae's body is found and the case is turned over to homicide. Adnan's cell phone records are also subpoenaed that day. It's likely that not a lot of tangible information was provided from the tipster. The tipster called on February 1st. Hae wasn't found until the 9th. We can assume that the tipster didn't know where her body was or have any information on her still missing car. Otherwise, detectives would have followed up on information provided like that. Now, we know Jay was interested in buying the motorcycle, but it was more than that. Jay would go on to become an integral part to the case. He was the key witness for the state at Adnan's trial in 2000 because of the shocking information he had. Listen to this. Jay said Adnan killed Hae in the parking lot of a local Best Buy. It was a frequent place that the two would go and hook up. Jay said that he helped Adnan bury Hae in Leakin Park. Jay was interviewed at least 4 times by police, once on February 28th, on March 15th, March 18th, and then again on April 14th. On March 18th, detectives take Jay on a ride-along so he could show them the route he and Adnan allegedly took on January 13th. Police notes referenced a Mr. Brown selling a Suzuki motorcycle, 600 cc's with 9,000 miles on it. There were also the vague words private investigator, going to discredit, and reward. Cryptic. Police made numerous visits to Woodlawn High School to interview teachers and staff. These were people who knew or taught Adnan and Hae at one point or another. It made sense why they'd be questioned. But one interview stood out. Carl Browns, a soccer coach who didn't know Adnan or Hae. He knew Jay though. His file was also distinctly different from the others. While the other files had police notes in them, Mr. Brown's did not. Instead, his had 2 printouts of Kelley Blue Book information for Suzuki motorcycles, matching the description Jay gave about the motorcycle Mr. Brown was selling. Jay's girlfriend Stephanie had also told detectives that he was planning on buying a motorcycle. On February 26, 2 detectives visit Adnan at his home and question him in the presence of his father. Police arrest him on February 28th. His classmates were shocked when they heard the news. Many even went to the principal's office in his defense, claiming they had the wrong person. At the initial bail hearing, the charging document had Adnan's birth year listed incorrectly as 1980 instead of 1981. That put him at 18 years old instead of 17. That was a critical error because being charged with murder, which is a capital offense when you're over 18, means you're not eligible for bail. Adnan's lawyers were hoping that once they got to circuit court, they'd be able to have the error updated and at least bail Adnan out. But that never happened and he remained behind bars to be tried as an adult. On December 15, 1999, Adnan's first trial ends in a mistrial when jurors accidentally overhear the judge call Adnan's attorney at the time, Cristina Gutierrez, a liar. In 2000, the year Adnan's trial took place, detectives were just starting to learn about using cell tower location data in criminal cases, using the theory that a cell phone finds a tower to ping off that the call goes to and shows the area that person's phone was in. Well, on the day of January 13th, Jay claims that he had Adnan's car. He said he took Adnan to school and dropped him off. He was going to go buy his girlfriend Stephanie a birthday present. The school had a strict no cell phone policy, so Adnan left the phone in the car with Jay, and he sure wasn't shy about using it. Phone records show calls made to the Pusateri residence. That'd be Jay's best bud, Jennifer Pusateri. She was a year older than Adnan, and like Jay, was in the graduating class of 98. She didn't know Hae or Adnan. Her only connection to them was Jay. Jennifer claims that on January 13th, Jay had come over to her house to hang out like he always did. Jennifer remembers him having a cell phone on him, which was odd because Jay didn't have a cell phone. Remember, back then having a cell phone wasn't as common. Most teens would have had something like a pager if they had anything at all. In fact, Adnan was the only one in his friend group that even had a cell phone. Jennifer said Jay got a call around 3:30 or 3:45 and left. Later that evening, he called Jennifer to come and pick him up from the Value City parking lot at Westview Mall. She said Adnan was with him. In Jay's version of events, he claims Adnan dropped him off at home and then Jen picked him up there. Jennifer sticks to her story. She said Jay got in her car, told her to buckle up, and that's when he told her that Adnan strangled Hae. He said he saw Hae's body in the trunk of the car. He allegedly told Jennifer he didn't want to go to the police because he didn't have any useful information, only what Adnan had told him. And the fact fact that he saw her body. Other than that, he didn't know anything. I don't know about you, but I definitely consider that pertinent information and something the police should definitely know. Jennifer says Jay told her to drive behind the mall and head over to an area with dumpsters. He tells Jennifer he gave Adnan the shovels to bury Hae's body, and he wanted to wipe them down to make sure his fingerprints weren't anywhere on them. Right, sure. You're probably wondering, if Jennifer was privy to all this information, why didn't she go to the police? She said she was worried about the trouble she might get in due to her involvement with certain illegal substances. Detectives used the call logged and pinged cell phone towers as a solid guide in piecing together a timeline. However, once they mapped the cell sites, they realized that Jay's story didn't match the call logs or the cell sites. So, detectives called him in for a second statement. From the police logs and recorded statement, it was determined that they talked off the books for roughly 3 hours before finally turning on the tape recorder to get a new statement. This led many to believe that detectives fed Jay a story. While mapping the cell sites, it was discovered that there were a number of errors made in referencing certain zone locations. Well, rather than admit to the errors, detectives seemingly had Jay change his story to fit the errors made on the cell site map, despite how utterly confused it left those involved. At his second trial on February 25th of 2000, the judge sentences Adnan to life plus 30, the life sentence for Hae's murder, and 30 years for kidnapping. On March 19th of 2003, Adnan's first appeal is denied. In May of 2010, Adnan's attorney files another appeal, and in October of 2012, arguments in his post-conviction relief case were heard. 3 years later, on December 30th, 2013, Adnan's petition is denied again. On February 6th of 2015, Maryland's Court of Special Appeals grants permission to appeal the denial. On November 6, 2015, Adnan's post-conviction relief case is reopened after presenting new evidence to fight his case. In early February of 2016, Adnan's hearing takes place. It's scheduled to last 3 days but goes 5. His argument rests on 2 points: that his attorney failed to use his alibi, Asia McClain, who says she was with Adnan the day of the murder. Asia says there's no way Adnan could have done it. She saw Adnan that day at the library, and the two had a 20-minute conversation at the same time prosecutors say Hae was murdered. She claims she was dissuaded from testifying at Adnan's post-conviction hearing by the prosecutor. The second piece of information was that a cell phone expert who helped place Adnan's phone where Hae's body was buried says that his findings were based on unreliable data. When cell phone records were obtained from AT&T, the company sent over a how-to cover sheet for reading their subscriber activity reports. Apparently nobody bothered to read it back then. It declared that only outgoing calls were reliable for location status, and that any incoming calls would not be considered reliable information for location. This was huge, because every call that was used to show something incriminating was an incoming call. And apparently a judge thought it was huge too, because on June 30th of 2016, Adnan's original conviction is vacated, and the judge grants Adnan a new trial based on the grounds that he received ineffective counsel in 2000. After multiple appeals from the state to overturn the judge's 2016 decision, on March 29, 2018, Adnan's new trial was upheld. In a 138-page report published after the March 29th ruling, the circuit court appeared to have strong opinions about the new information provided. They stated, with little forensic evidence, the case was largely dependent on witness testimony of events before and after Hae's death. Testimony of these witnesses often conflicted with the state's corroborating evidence, i.e. the cell phone records and the cell tower location testimony by its expert. The state's key witness, Wilds, also was problematic, something the state readily admitted during its opening statement. Wilds had given 3 different statements to the police about the events surrounding Hae's death. The state's case was weakest when it came to the time it theorized that Syed killed Hae. As the post-conviction court highlighted in its opinion, Wilds' own testimony conflicted with the state's timeline of the murder. Moreover, there was no video surveillance outside the Best Buy parking lot placing Hae and Syed together at the Best Buy parking lot during the afternoon of the murder. No eyewitness testimony placing Syed and Hae together leaving school or at the Best Buy parking lot. No eyewitness testimony, video surveillance, or confession of the actual murder. No forensic evidence linking Syed to the act of strangling Hae or putting Hae's body in the trunk of her car, and no records from the Best Buy payphone documenting a phone call to Syed's cell phone. In short, at trial, the state adduced no direct evidence of the exact time that Hae was killed, the location where she was killed, and the acts of the killer immediately before and after Hae was strangled, and of course the identity of the person who killed Hae. It is our opinion that if McLean's testimony had been presented to the jury, it would have altered the entire evidentiary picture because her testimony would have placed Syed at the Woodlawn Public Library at the time the state claimed that Syed murdered Hae. Such testimony would have directly contradicted the state's theory of when Syed had the opportunity and did murder Hae. The state even implicitly conceded the strength of McLean's testimony and its potential impact on the jury when it attempted to present a new timeline for the murder at the second hearing. The post-conviction court aptly noted that the new timeline would negate or would have negated the relevance of the potential alibi. The state had 30 days to decide if they would appeal the ruling, and with only a few days remaining, they do. Had the state decided not to appeal it, they would have either proceeded to trial or offered Adnan a plea deal. There were a number of items collected with DNA on them that were taken into evidence back in 1999 that were never tested. And with the state announcing that they would be appealing the decision to give Adnan a new trial, his legal team felt like it was the right time to focus on testing the DNA that hadn't been analyzed. This whole time, they had been treading carefully with the idea of testing the DNA. Now, logically, with the two of them dating and then having remained friends, it was highly likely that his DNA would be found in Hae's car just from regular interactions the two had. But it also posed the question of why the prosecutor never had them tested either. It seemed both sides feared that it would either exonerate or incriminate him. Some of the items logged as evidence that his team wanted to focus on were fingernails, a rope found near Hae's body, and a fingerprint that was taken off the rearview mirror in Hae's car. In total, there were 12 samples that were tested for DNA. The results showed Adnan's DNA wasn't found under Hae's fingernails, on any samples taken from inside the car, or on any samples taken from her body. His DNA wasn't found anywhere. Now, because Adnan's DNA wasn't found in the car, that means whoever was in the car with Hae wasn't Adnan, right? Now, a DNA profile was taken from the rope found near Hae's body, but whoever the DNA profile belongs to isn't in any database, meaning they've never been arrested or booked. And just because your fingerprints are in the system doesn't mean your DNA is. Private investigators hire forensic pathologist Dr. Jan Gorniak to take a look at the case. Investigators had Dr. Gorniak look at scene photographs, autopsy photographs, as well as the autopsy report. They wanted to know what she thought. She did agree with the initial findings that Hae's cause of death was strangulation. She noted the hyoid bone was broken. That's the U-shaped bone that sits high up in your neck. That's relevant to the diagnosis because in a third of all homicides by strangulation, this bone gets fractured. One of the claims had always been that Hae was killed in her own car. However, there were skeptics of this theory. When a person is fighting for their lives, literally, you often see multiple injuries on the body. For instance, you might expect to see bruising on the arms and broken fingernails. However, Hae's autopsy report noted nothing on her extremities and listed her fingernails as intact. There were also blanched marks on Hae's right shoulder that were shaped like two diamonds. With what we know to be true about the postmortem body thanks to science, the marks on her shoulder were not consistent with the timeline of events that Jay had given. Something would have had to have been pushed up against her shoulder for 8 to 12 hours for those patterns to become fixed like they were. And because the double diamond-shaped marks on Hae's shoulders were so pronounced and had such a unique pattern, it was something that investigators kept coming back to. Eventually, they believed it was possible that the marks were caused by a concrete shoe, a tool used in grinding up concrete. Now, this is notable because Alonzo Sellers, the guy who says he found Hae in Leakin Park, worked doing concrete jobs for many years. Investigators also discovered that Alonzo lived near Woodlawn High School. I'm talking only about a 5-minute walk, but it's unclear if he lived that close in 1999. When we go back and look at Don Kleindienst, we can see that police didn't spend much time investigating him in '99. In fact, police didn't question him in person until February 4th, 3 weeks after Hae went missing. This time around, investigators wanted to do more digging into him. They got in contact with a few of the employees who worked at LensCrafters. A lab manager for the company, Thomas Precht, provided very insightful information. He told investigators that he thought it was odd for Don to be working at their Hunt Valley location on that Wednesday. He said the only reason Don would have gone in that day was if the lab manager at the Hunt Valley store would have called in sick. We know that wasn't the case because Charles's time card shows that he was working on that day. It wouldn't make sense for 2 lab managers to be working on a Wednesday. Another employee comes forward with information but asked to remain anonymous. Now, he claims he remembers talking to Don about Hae's disappearance, and Don's hands had scratch marks and bandages on them from his wrist to his knuckles. Yeah. Now, he said at the time Don brushed it off, saying that it was from working on his car or, something innocent like that, but pretty interesting, right? And since we know that police didn't talk to him in person for 3 weeks after Hae's disappearance, it would have given his injuries time to heal. On November 27, 2018, just 2 days before the Court of Appeals hearing, the Attorney General extends an offer to resolve the case. They want Adnan to plead guilty, no Alfred plea, which is when a defendant maintains their innocence, but admits that the prosecution's evidence would likely result in a guilty verdict if brought to trial. Essentially, it gives the defendant the ability to accept a plea bargain while maintaining their innocence. They also want Adnan to serve another 4 years in prison. Keep in mind, at this point, he's already served almost 20 years. Adnan declines the state's plea offer, and on March 8, 2019, the Court of Appeals makes a shocking decision to reverse both lower court decisions and deny Adnan a new trial, saying that McLean's testimony would not have affected the outcome of the proceedings. I have my doubts that Adnan was the one that killed Hae. My heart breaks for both families because they've both essentially just been through the ringer. I really think that they should look more into Don and Alonzo. I find it very hard to believe that Alonzo just happened to pull over, walk into the brush, and stop right near her body. I don't know, and his whole demeanor just kind of rubs me the wrong way, and I thought he was just so rude in court when he took the stand. This case takes a lot of twists and turns, but we can't forget that an innocent life was taken. If Hae were alive today, she'd be 41 years old. It's very easy to see how Hae's death gets overshadowed by the workings of this case. I don't want to do that. I would, however, just like many of you, like to see the person responsible for her death made accountable. What do you think? Let's have a conversation in the comments. Some of you are little detectives of your own with really good theories. If you enjoyed today's investigation, give this video a like, and hey, while you're at it, consider subscribing to the channel so you're notified every time a new investigation comes out.